I am the place where God shows up. I am the place where life shows up. You are the place where God shows up. You're the place where God shows up as love, as compassion, as, as prosperity, as you heard in that spiritual mind treatment, and as all of the aspects of life that are lived and moving through you. And as we become more intentional about and more aware of that, this is not just me caring, it's not just me teaching, it's spirit, God, life through me teaching, then it takes on a whole new power and meaning and a great deal more satisfaction for all of us to feel a life that matters and to experience a life that that we can trust to be for our good and for the good of all. You know, when children are come into the world, John Bradshaw said this about 30 years ago. I was thinking about this the other day, and about when I was working on this quote, and I went and looked up his book and went, oh my goodness, that was a long time ago. But it's still true today. And what he said in that at the beginning of his whole work about children and addiction and all of the things that he wrote about was that there's a two-pronged pull for all of us through childhood that carries on into adulthood, but in very different ways than from when we were children. And that is that, first of all, on one side, we need to matter. A child has to matter and has to know that that child matters. They matter to their family, they matter to their caretakers, they matter to the people who are holding them, who are loving them, who are making them, helping them walk through those early times of getting used to a body and getting used to a culture and living in the world, having left whatever spiritual realm there is before we get here, and starting to really take shape and form in their lives. So it's really powerfully important for children to matter. And a child will find a way to matter, even if it looks destructive, if there's not a positive message coming to them. They'll matter by becoming the hero for the family, the one to do it all right. Or they'll matter by becoming the scapegoat, to get all the family's pain and trouble into them, and then struggle to carry that away into addictions and all sorts of other things in adulthood. Some way to always matter in the family, you know? I won't go too far in that because there's a whole lot more I want to say today, but there's a lot where that as we grow into adulthood, how we discovered mattering as children carries forward. I learned very early on that it was a really smart thing to figure out what the adults wanted and try to give it to them, try to be that for them. And no surprise that when I reached about my early young adulthood, I went through a real crisis because I was living according to what I thought everybody else wanted instead of the truth of who I am. I never spoke up. I wasn't ever heard. I kept very quiet except to watch and see who needs what, and then I tried to fill that in. Well, as you see, that has changed. I speak up, I'm out loud, and I'm speaking from here, who I am, not from what I think you think I should be. So there's that mattering track, and then there's that other track is about trust. That in early childhood, the child is being held by an adult, needs to have a feeling transmitted through that holding that they can trust that those caretakers, they can trust those around them to take care of them and to support them because they're very vulnerable and they're small, and you know, life is dangerous for a little kid in a way that it isn't for those of us who are older. So trust becomes such a big deal. They need to trust their parents or their caretakers or their grandparents or their teachers or those people around them to be there for them and have their very best interest in mind. And for so many people, that is the way it was. And for so many others, it wasn't the way it was. That trust was not ever really established. That parents weren't being careful in taking care of them. Maybe some of us, too, in that story. Perhaps parents are always, I do believe they're always doing the best they can, but sometimes that best doesn't include providing a lot of support and trust for the child. fast forward all of that into a mature adulthood and into this teaching, and we ask the question, so what does religious science, science of mind, all those words are interchangeable, new thought, have to say about that, and how does this teaching in particular support us in adulthood with those two prongs of life? Because it's still true today. We need to feel we are in a world we can trust, that's going to be here for us and support us. Today is a day when we are honoring and remembering 9/11, the time when we suddenly discovered in this country we were no longer protected and safe like we thought we were. So issues of trust became very big. And it's very interesting that in the early aftermath of that, those of us who were still around, who did not go on to other places or pass away during that crisis, suddenly came face to face with the question, what is it that really matters to me? And people who were working in business quit their jobs and went and became, guides. I met a guy who was a guide at the Grand Canyon, and he had been a high up executive in New York, and he said after 9/11 he realized for his life to matter, he needed to be doing something more true to him. So he went to become something different. For me, it was a deeper question of what are the important questions? What are the important things that matter to me about life? What is it that drives me, that brings me forward? What's my why? Why am I doing it? So it brought that matter to the forefront. And that means for us who understand something about this teaching, it opens the door then for us to start really seriously creating the lives that matter to us. Because you see, when we talk about a life that matters, it's not a life that matters to your pop or your mom or to the people who told you what you should be when you grow up. I was supposed to be a musician, and I did that until my mid-30s. And I was a good musician, and I was a very successful musician. And then one day I walked off of a stage after a big performance, and I heard a little voice in my head that said, "That's it, you're done. You don't need to do that anymore. You've succeeded at doing what the family said they wanted you to do." I'm like, "Ew, I've spent all this money and time preparing for this. Now what? What matters?" And it took a while before I got into this teaching to find out that this is what matters. And the vision evolved in me and came forward. I mean, I'm sharing this not because, yay, look at Bob, but to talk about how the process works. You may suddenly find yourself very successful at what you've been doing, and then discover that's not what matters anymore. And that's a tough spot. It's a scary place for many people. It was for me. I sort of stumbled around for a few years trying to figure out what's now. Jumped into some training programs and some other things that I knew I was interested in. Took some testing to find out what my skills were. And over that next few years, what began to emerge was a vision of me, a vision of what would draw my life forward from that moment on, from there forward, no matter what kind of job I was doing. And it had three prongs. It was a vision of knowing God, having as much understanding as possible of this thing called God, this infinite, which is not possible to grasp in its wholeness in any way. Teaching truth, which I'm doing now, and living love, which I do every day. And that vision is what has carried me forward. So I know when I question myself at times, so does it really matter whether I get up this morning or not? I'd really rather stay in bed. My answer is always, do I matter? I matter because of that vision and because of my choice to live that vision. And you matter because of your choices to live the vision that you know is yours. And sometimes we try to tell ourselves we don't know what it is. But you do if you're uncomfortable in any way with that thought of, here's my vision. And there are all sorts of processes and procedures and tests and things that you can put yourself through in your consciousness to trick yourself into knowing the truth. And it takes a little time sometimes. But you know who you are. You know what you want. Way down inside, there's that part of you that speaks, so whispers in your ear and says, no. One of the ways I discovered that was important for me in finding my way was who I was jealous of. Not a very positive way to grow, but it sure gave me indicators of where I needed to look, where my desire was. I get so angry at some people because of the way they spoke or what they were saying that wasn't quite right, and yet they were successful and all of that. And I realized that was my call. That was what was pulling me to speak more and teach more and do more. And I'm grateful to say I am doing it. I'm happily doing it. So that idea is then we engage the creative process of the universe to support us in finding and creating and moving forward into that thing we are and that thing we are created to be, that life that matters to us. You know, and the creative process is all about getting the idea and getting it as clearly as we can and deciding and thinking and writing and choosing what we can believe about it. And when we get the desire and we know it's there and then we choose to believe in it and ourselves, spiritual law that's automatic and working for everybody kicks in and starts bringing it forth and bringing it forward into demonstrations and manifestations and opportunities to experience and express and be that which you know yourself to be and that which you know is yours to do. Sometimes that means acting as if it were true when it's not. And this is really true for those of us sometimes who've been between jobs. If you've ever been between a job, and if your job is and your career is your vocation, that which you feel called to, and then you're in between doing it, you're like, what? Act as if. Act as if. Do those things which begin to move you toward that thing, even though it may not be happening in your life at the time. There's Ernest Holmes said nearly 100 years ago now that whenever we are doing a treatment, when we're setting that creative process in motion, and the universe begins to show up with answers to whatever we have asked or treated for and said, this is what I want to manifest, such as a job or a career or a partner or anything else. He said, even when the tiniest little bit of that thing shows up in your life, even if it's not yet the full expression of it, celebrate it, honor it, recognize it as part of the demonstration, as part of the activity happening. So that once the vision began to emerge of speaking, I went back and did another ministerial program, which is why I'm here. My first Sunday to speak, my first time to speak to the class, my throat got so dry, my voice got so tight, I couldn't finish my 5-minute talk. But I was successful in that I tried. And the next week I tried again. And with time, you can't shut me up. They have a big old clock down here that makes me stop so that this thing, we don't run too far over time. I have no problem now. I love speaking. But I had to celebrate the steps toward it until I began to do it and begin to have the experience again of teaching and leading and healing. And you have the same opportunity. You act as if, and you celebrate those little steps. There's some fascinating things coming out right now in brain science. I've been playing around with that. And one of the things, Andrew Huberman is right now is my go-to guru for this. He teaches at Stanford, and he has some things out on the internet, and he's got some books, interesting stuff. One of the things he says, and we all know and have heard about dopamine being that thing that lifts us up and makes us happy and gives us a boost. It's in our physical systems. But what he says, if you wait to celebrate the final result, then you have that dopamine rush, and then it's all over. And then it's down into, and most people will then crash into some kind of depression. But if you understand how dopamine really works in your system, instead, when you celebrate every little step toward, then the dopamine kicks in, and not only do you feel good, but it gives you the energy and motivation to take the next step. One of his great examples is, to me, is because it applies to me. If you want to be a runner or take walks every day, but you just haven't been able to discipline yourself to do it, and you beat yourself up for not doing it, start this way. Take your walking shoes and put them by the door and count that as a success. And celebrate in your mind and consciousness the success that you got far enough to put your shoes by the door. Day 2, you go pick up those shoes and put them on and walk around your house, or walk outside, or walk around the block, or walk a little bit. And then you celebrate, wow, I got this far. Now, that may not seem much, and our tendency would be then to beat ourselves up for not doing more. But what we do is we celebrate the fact that we took a step. And the next day, perhaps you'll walk around the block. Or perhaps the next day, you'll just put your shoes by the door again. But you do something. So that when you do that, it kicks off the dopamine. Yeah, our brains are the organ that works and that consciousness uses in order to bring who we are and what we are into form and shape. So when that happens, that dopamine kickoff is really important. And you keep working. There's a whole other set of stuff that I'm not going to go into today because I can't really, I don't understand it enough to speak to it, but I invite you to take a look at it and to think about it and consider that if you're trying to bring a greater something into your life, whatever it is, a greater relationship, a greater job, a different job, perhaps. If you're trying to change anything, do it by setting the end goal, but celebrate every tiny little step along the way, because that gives you the motivation to take the next one and the next one. And if you completely stop, then start again. Put the shoes by the door. This is how I got into a meditation practice that's been going on every day now for a long time. I used to be the one to say, yeah, let's all meditate. But didn't mean I remembered to do it or got it done every day. But now I started by sitting down in the place where I always meditate, whether I meditated or not, and celebrated the fact that I got in my chair. And then I meditated 5 minutes a day and 10 minutes a day. And now I do 20 to 25 in the morning and 20 at night every day. And I can't tell you what a difference it makes in my life, because it jumpstarts so many things, and it gives me such a deep sense of peace. So it's interesting to me that the old-time metaphysicians, Likert has told us, were speaking truths that today's scientists are supporting and finding out. That's my point. That's why we call this religious science. It is the science of religion, and it is a religion of science, in that the two are blended together and they brought forward as truth. Now, the other prong of this talk today, having to do with trust and having to do with mattering, is one of the most profound things I ever heard Kennedy Schultz say. And I'm giving him credit because I never heard anybody else say it. And when he was talking about work, he said one Sunday, it just shook me to my toes. Because I was working for the state of Georgia, running myself ragged, trying to keep up with a caseload that was ridiculous and doing all kinds of things. And Kennedy said, you're always self-employed, whatever you're doing, wherever you're working. And I went, those people are bossing me around. I ain't self-employed. I wish I were. I'd do things differently. But he went on with that. You're always self-employed, regardless of who's writing your check and when you get it and where it comes from and what the name of your job is. Because without you, nobody would be in that job. It's your job. It's yours. You bring your consciousness, your truth, your gifts, and all of those things that make you who you are to the job. So you are always self-employed. The person you must satisfy in your work for a life that matters, first and foremost, is yourself. And if you're not satisfying yourself and your desire to share and to give, and your desire to be rewarded, and your desire and right to be respected and be treated with respect, and to have that sense of dignity and security, and yet be challenged towards new and greater things to grow. Unless you're doing that for yourself in your work, then maybe it's time to find something else to do. I was with a partner at that time, and when he said, and Kennedy went on to say, and if none of that's there, then you ought to just quit your job tomorrow because you're not doing yourself or anybody else any good. My partner elbowed me really hard at that moment. Don't you dare, he whispered. And I didn't. A week later, I did. I put in my notice, 2 weeks. Had no idea how I was going to take what I had learned and make it into a self-employment private practice sort of an idea. I broke all the rules because I was so clear this is what was next for me, and that I could not have any of those things that mattered and satisfied myself in that other job. And so I quit. And I treated, and I prayed, and I looked, and I pulled out all the stops. And you know what happened? I broke the rules. They tell you if you leave a job kind of a thing and go into private practice, you need to have stored up at least a year's worth of money, because you're not going to make anything for a year while you're building your practice. I had a full practice in 30 days because some people saw what I do and who I am and recognized my gifts and wanted me to be engaged in that way and help support me in securing clients and a steady supply and stream. I worked in different systems here in Atlanta, in different hospitals and groups that were there, and from that began to grow a practice that served me very well for a lot of years. Again, that's how you do it. You decide what you can do. You take the risk if it's going to be that for you. I'm not suggesting that you should do that if you're not absolutely convinced, like I was, that you could do it. But I was. See, we are here to fulfill a God-implanted, God quality of service. We talked last week that that's what work is. It is service to the world and service to ourselves in the process, because it's a flow. It's a both direction kind of giving. We are here for that purpose. So a job, a work, a choice about career, creating places where we matter and where we trust and feel supported are vital to our freedom to do that and our ability to do that. Because if you give to the world in that way, I promise you the world will give back to you. The world will give back to you in kind and sometimes multiplied. There's a quote that's about 175 years old. I know because I know exactly when it was done. It came out in a book in 1847 entitled Walden Pond. And this is what the wonderful Henry David Thoreau had to say. I learned this at least, that my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of one's dreams and endeavors to live the life which one has imagined, you will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. I love that quote. It's something I've carried with me. I have it on my wall. This book was vital to me when I was in the 9th and 10th, 11th grade. I carried a battered old paperback copy with me everywhere. But the quote goes on, and that's what I want to share too. One will put some things behind, will pass an invisible barrier. New, universal, and more liberal laws will begin to establish themselves around and within you. Or the old laws will be expanded and interpreted in your favor in more liberal sense. In other words, the world will start to respond to you according to what you desire and want it to. Yeah. You will live with a license of higher order beings. Yeah, think about that. In proportion as one simplifies one's life, the laws of the universe will appear less complex. Solitude will not be solitude. Poverty will not be poverty, and weakness will not be weakness. If you have built castles in the sky, your work need not be lost, because that's where they should be. Now, put foundations under them. Take what you've dreamed, take what you've imagined, and put foundations on it. That's what we're all about. We are creating lives in form and shape and time that are the foundations under our dreams, our desires, and our fantasies. And those are all good, God-inspired, because so are you, so am I, and so it is. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.